because your followers ask, we will bring you on because no one will debate. Do it or don't do it, and shut the fuck up.
So let's break this down. Let me tell you the story. We'll start with a tweet here from Jake Shields. He says, Tim Pool is such a joke of a man with no principles. Last month he told me he told me he would let have and Nick Fuentes on to debate Israel. Later he called and said he didn't feel equipped to debate and needed to find multiple Zionists for the panel. False! I don't debate Zionism. The Culture War show, when it is a debate, is, as anybody knows who's watched it, two different people. For instance, maybe you watched yesterday's,
So you're jumping in the middle of the beef. You might have heard already, Jake Shields, and it's kind of silly. We're grown men, over this type of stuff. And Jake is, when you talk about the booking, this is Jake. Why is this public? Jake to me, this is where it started. That's why Tim started with this post on X. And he just said, Tim Pool is a joke of a man with no principles. And Jake is the one that Tim offered him a spot on the show, is what he said. And then Tim says Jake needed Nick to come with him. Jake wanted Nick to come with him. And I think a friend of the show, Eric Smith, had a great question on the previous video. He was like, why did Jake want Nick to come with him? I don't know. I can only speculate because, when you get into these live, Tim does his shows live. When you are live, it can be very difficult, especially if you're not used to being behind a mic. Even if you are, it can be difficult. And I don't think Jake is. Jake doesn't have a podcast. I haven't seen him. Maybe he has done a lot of podcasting. I don't know. It doesn't come across that way at all, especially with how he's operating. So that's why you would bring Nick on, because Nick is just the best. So now you feel more comfortable in that space. But what I would recommend to Jake, I haven't heard him a lot in Twitter Spaces. Twitter Spaces are excellent to sharpen your skills. He's an MMA guy. You guys have to go and do your practicing, and you have to do all the different holds. And I don't know, I'm not an MMA guy, but you spar. And that's what Twitter Spaces is. And I keep bringing her name up, and I think that girl, Casey, would be a great guest on TimCast. So I might try to create some notification on X to Cassandra on that. But she has unbelievably sharpened her knives in these Twitter Spaces, man. She's quickly one of the best out there in this political, in whatever you call my space. She's one of the best, period. Articulating, recall, and I think it's all because of those Twitter Spaces, and she does her own research, but those Twitter Spaces really bring out the best in you. So let's bring this back. Tim Pool talking about the Jake Shields stuff.
Last week's episode on abortion, where we had a pro-choice pastor and a pro-life activist. And of course, because of the disparity between, like the moderate position and the leftist position, certainly I had many questions for the pro-choice guy, but I certainly had questions for the pro-left individual as well. And many people pointed out when we had Vosh and Charlie Kirk on TimCast IRL, again, I moderated. There are certain things where I may debate someone. We did have an episode of Vosh where we debated. And my position being like classically or traditionally liberal versus their progressive position is when we debate it. However, let me tell you what happened. Actually, let me finish his tweet for him. He says, I called him back last week to see what he wanted to do, and he ignored my calls. Eventually, he had his employee tell me that he changed his mind. Personally, I believe a man should always keep his word, and if he doesn't, at least have the balls to talk to who you lied to. These are our brave right-wing influencers.
I do agree with Jake that Tim could have given him a call. But Tim's busy, obviously. So I'm not blaming Tim for ignoring calls or anything. Like, I miss all these. I miss DMs, calls. I got too much stuff, man. I got people DMing me. I'm not even huge or anything like that. I got people DMing me through the Facebook Messenger and Instagram and X and email. I'm like, I need artificial intelligence to just swoop all that stuff up and tell me what I need to look at. And that's not an excuse. You just get organized, get better. But I'm not going to blame Tim for missing the calls or ignoring the calls. But I think this is such a big one with Jake and then Laura. He's going to talk about Laura Loomer, then Nick involved, that you probably want to do that yourself and say, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I think. Tim Pool is a man. He is, when you look at podcasters at his level, I don't know. I think he has as much integrity as anybody else. I always go back to this. Savannah Hernandez was on with Elijah Schaefer. It might be 2 years ago now, and she wanted to talk about the transformers in swimming. And Tim kind of dominated the conversation. He's gotten much better. He's gotten way better at not dominating the conversation on IRL. But back then, he was still very dominant. And Sav Says was like, I got information. I got an exclusive interview. I forgot the name of the swimmer. I don't think it was Gaines, but it could have been. And she didn't get a chance to go in. After that, she went on with Chrissy Mayer, and she just obliterated Tim. She went full blown on Tim, and Tim had her back on the show, and they had a great show. So I don't think this is over. I think it's possible that they reset this. I think it's very possible that this can, because Tim is a guy of high integrity. He doesn't have to agree with you to have you on, as long as you respect his platform. I mean, this one is dangerous because we're talking about the J team, and you could get him banned. But if anybody would do it, it would be Tim. I can't tell Tim what to do. I wouldn't have Jake Shields if I were Tim. For me, I would have Nick on my channel here because I'm a fan of Nick, and I trust Nick, and I've seen Nick on these interviews. So I would have Nick on the YouTube. But because of what's happening here, I think Tim actually could still trust Nick. I don't know if he could trust Jake, though. So I would probably do it on Rumble. Try to promote your Rumble or something. Do a Rumble-only exclusive. I don't know. I'm not going to tell Tim. Tim's the business master.
I wonder why Nick Fuentes didn't want to mention Laura Loomer. I wonder why Jake and Nick did not mention Laura Loomer. I like Laura. I think she's fierce. I think she's the biggest Trump supporter imaginable, and possibly the tip of the spear of all spears, one of the most effective at getting PR.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like Tim bringing Laura into this. Laura didn't say anything. Cassandra didn't say anything about Laura. Cassandra was like, my name's Bennett, and I ain't in it. She was like, keep me out of this. Because all she was trying to do is put the show together. She's put together great shows repeatedly for them. If you don't know, Cassandra used to be Fairbanks. Did he call her Fairbanks again? McDonald. But that's kind of funny here. So let's go back to Tim.
Really? Wow.
I don't like him bringing Laura Loomer in here. Why is she brought in? I understand Tim needs to defend himself, but Laura didn't want to get involved.
And so considering Laura is Jewish, and I believe, I don't want to put words in her mouth, a Zionist.
Yes, she is.
We said this would be the biggest show ever.
Let's just be clear. She's a proud, self-described Zionist, and I'm a big supporter of hers. I don't need to agree with you. Friend of the show, Carlos. I don't know if Carlos would define himself as a Zionist, but he's pro-Israel. Friend of the show, Adam Francisco is, I believe, pro-Israel. We falling out over the Israel stuff? I don't want to do that. So yeah, I like Laura. She's the Zion of she is the Zion of Zionists.
Let's do it. Laura said no. I'm like, okay, sorry, Laura, to bring your name up, but if this is the game they're going to play, and they don't want to mention the show we tried to organize, with all due respect, maybe Laura's unable to do it for whatever reason. Those are her reasons. I don't do booking. I don't know. Maybe Laura, I don't know. I can tell you this. Cassandra Fairbanks does booking for TimCast IRL. I don't. I often don't.
Tim and Cassandra go way back, so he doesn't even know the McDonald's. He's still calling her Fairbanks.
Know who the guests are. We have a guest roster, and names pop up, and I say, oh, cool. Lisa Reynolds books guests for the Culture War. Lisa Reynolds tried to book Jake Shields months ago. We reached out trying to get him on the show. He didn't want to do it. I don't know why. I don't do booking. So I'll tell you what happens. I get a message from Cassandra saying, I reached out to Jake Shields to have him on the show. He says he'll only do it if we allow Nick Fuentes on. What do you think? And I was like, oh, here we go. Because I know exactly what's going to happen.
Tim knows. Tim is actually a debate bro, if you don't know. He's a kind of a, if he didn't do this type of channel, he would be like a Destiny, a more based classic liberal Destiny. And as soon as you see that, Jake is not serious. I mean, somebody says, hey, do you want to come on the podcast? Oh, I'm only going to come on if Might Be Wrong can come on with me. And Might Be Wrong would be like, yeah, I'll go. But like, why? I don't need to holler at somebody else to come on a podcast with me. Like, if you want to have us all together, I'm fine with that. But I don't need to be like, I'm not going on your pod, Tim, or whoever else, if I can't bring Ray Studios with me or any friend of the show, Metalopoly with me or whoever. I'm like, wait, no, I can go on my own. That's a red flag. That's definitely a red flag.
Middle MAGA.